Welcome back to Sparkle on Substack, the podcast with me, Claire Venus. I'm so excited today because I've got a Substack superstar on the other side of the world talking to me via Zoom. Welcome, Linda.
Hi, Claire. I'm so happy to be here. This is great.
It's so nice to see you. So Linda's over in Toronto in Canada, and I'm here on the Northumberland Coast. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, I try and speak to people who are as passionate about the platform as I am. So people who really love Substack. So I guess Linda is one of them, seeing how she works there. So I'll let her introduce herself, and then we're going to get into some chat about all of the different ways that you can stay creative on the platform. And I have some member questions as well to run past Linda. So we'll get chatting. But yeah, it'd be lovely if you could introduce yourself to everybody who's listening, Linda. Thank you.
Claire, for sure. So a lot of people who are listening here might know me because I post on Substack Notes on our short form posting on the app, or they might have seen me talking about Substack on Twitter. My actual job is on the writer partnerships team, and most of what I do involves talking to people who aren't on Substack yet and trying to get them to come on Substack. And it's usually people who are going to bring some audience or bring something that they're doing that is going to, we think, work on Substack. So it's a little bit of a sales job, but at the same time, I really do, like you said, I love the platform, and I think it can be fabulous and fantastic for people who are building from scratch. I've definitely have seen many a story of people be very successful building from scratch. So myself and other people on the writer partnerships team, and indeed everybody at Substack, want to be in dialogue like this and be able to answer questions. So hopefully I can give some inside baseball to your listeners today and be able to dig in a little bit more on all this stuff. But yeah, I would love to share.
Oh, brilliant, Linda. And just, I'm super interested. How long have you been at Substack and what was your background before you arrived on this like fantastic tech platform? Obviously, it was still a kind of startup, I think, when I joined. I think we know that it was
Yeah.
established in 2017, but it was still kind of finding its essence of what it wanted to be and what it wanted to offer. And it felt like a really generous and spacious place to kind of go on that journey. I know the co-founders are very, very visible in notes and very, very positive about being very open and forthright around the changes that have been planned. So yeah, I'd love to know your history and when in the journey you plugged in.
I came to Substack in March 2021, and I came from a lot of the people on my team. They have a background in media or in publishing, or of course, a lot of people at Substack are technical people and they have a background working at big tech companies or tech startups. I actually came from the investment industry. So I was my whole career working in portfolio management, and I had a complete midlife crisis and wanted to do something very different. And Substack at the time was 30 employees, and it was in March 2021. It was a smaller, and I'm searching for my words here. It was taking shape. It was taking form. But the idea, the kernel of what Substack was going to be, the founders always had it in their minds. They had a vision from the beginning that it would empower and enable people to have independent incomes, first with writing and now with podcasting, video, and you name it. So it was, and I pursued the role. Like I pursued talking to Hamish because I knew some people who had come on Substack and been very successful. And I thought, oh, this is, kind of something that might be quite revolutionary. So luckily things have, and that's very risky to join a startup with 30 people because things at that point, you don't know, it could crash and burn, but luckily it hasn't. It has truly been something that has made millions of dollars for lots of people. So it has been, and now some people listening may or may not know, Substack is between 90 and 100 employees now. I couldn't tell you exactly on the exact day, but we have grown. But I think the platform's functionality and maybe how well known it is and its aspirations have grown more than triple. I mean, we've tripled our employees, but still 90 to 100 people is not really that much. So that's been the story of the past 3.5 years for me.
Fascinating. And it's lovely that there was just that kind of calling and that opening. And then you
Hmm.
stayed with the company. We're now recording in 2024. If you're listening in the future. I know when I first started on Substack, so there was real, and I've spoken about this in the podcast before, but there was this real permission slip for me to express myself, to find a voice that had been buried for a long time, to
Hmm.
work out what was that blend of personal and professional that I was so passionate about, and work out where that kind of crossed over with the education that I still wanted to do in the world that was on the internet, worldwide. So there was this real kind of coming back home to myself through just writing on the platform, writing, meeting people, sharing what I wanted to share. And my whole message has always been stay creative on Substack. Then at some sort of timely point, Substack said, hey, we're a new engine for culture. And I was like, oh my goodness, I could not believe it. So I'd been saying this platform's incredible. It never glitches. It's really easy to use. You know, creatives that are neurodivergent like me can find their way really easily around the platform, you know, as long as we ignore the huge long settings page. But even that you can wrap your
Yeah, we
head
can talk
around if
about
you've got
that.
enough time.
Yeah.
And then there was this invitation. So I was in the beta testing group for video, and I remember we had to just sort of say what we thought we might use video for. And I remember thinking, like, is this a pitch? Like, do I have to pitch to Substack? Because I was still very like, I just want to use it. You know, I just want to understand what it could be. I want to understand what that medium is with my audience who've been very warm towards long form written posts. But what if I did something similar that was a bit more vulnerable, maybe a little bit more behind the scenes? Like, how would that land? I'd already noticed that bubbling up, there was a lot of interest outside of the UK. So here in the UK, we're a very tiny island and we do get a little bit insular about things and we kind of box ourselves in. And I was very interested in working globally. So the interest that was bubbling up overseas for me, I really wanted to test that video format with them. And what I found was people were like, your accent is so cute. I love your accent. It's
They
amazing.
liked
And I
it.
was like, oh,
Interesting.
unexpected, you know?
Hmm.
So that was a really interesting time for me because it felt like I had time to play with it and, you know, see what it could be. And then, of course, when it was more widely kind of announced that Substack would have a video element, a media element, and podcasting had always been, from what I remember,
Hmm.
podcasting had always been possible since I was on the platform. People really panicked and were like, oh no, now I've got to do video. And what does this mean? Because over on Instagram, this, and then this happened, and now
Yeah.
TikTok. And it was this whole mesh of how the internet exists. And I was saying, no, no, guys, this is a true gift. Like you can use video in your way. And I can't really remember timeline wise, Linda, how long it's been since video was like officially rolled out, but how's it been? Like, how are you guys finding it? How are creators come into it? How does it all feel in the here and now?
Yeah, everything you said really resonates because the reason that people are nervous or have concerns about Substack coming and say, hey, we're bringing video, they're not wrong to be concerned because every other platform that has existed whose economic base is on advertising, what did they do? They started with text and writers said, oh, I have a home. Somebody cares about what I have to do. And then the day they pivoted to video, which is this cursed phrase that they all use, they pivot to video and right away they start pushing everybody to spend their whole life making videos. And they use, by algorithmic means, they disfavor what people have done. So if people have been trained that that is what internet platforms do, why would they expect Substack? Right. That's why Substack has had to prove ourselves over the course of the past 7 now years that it's existed, because people are skeptical for good reason. People are skeptical
Mm.
because they would, it's a strong word, but I think creators and writers have been abused by a
Mm.
lot of platforms who just see them as, oh, this, the work of their life is just a commodity that I can pluck and slap an ad on. That's really what it has been. And so Substack has had to not just make the point, but prove now that we are introducing podcasting when we did, or introducing new features for podcasting where we're leaning in and it's clear that we're putting more resources into it, or where it's clear we're putting more of our scarce resources into video, we have to show that, and people will have the experience that it is actually not taking anything away from you. I mean, I primarily, who I reach out to in terms of recruiting to Substack, reach out to finance, investing, trading, macroeconomics, business leadership type of writers and creators. Some of those people are doing video, but the majority are not. If somebody is, they used to work at JP Morgan and now they are doing stock write-ups on Substack, video is not going to be their first thing. So Substack still has to serve that person very well. Like the idea that Substack will not, most of your audience will know this, but Substack will not behave like a platform that is directing traffic among people in such a way as to like, well, we want more people to look at videos because then we can slap an ad on the end of it, and that's going to be 32% more effective and get this, 6% more clicks. It's just not, it's not the underlying economics of Substack, because what everybody knows, we only make a dime when somebody who writes on Substack makes $1. We only make money if the writer or creator makes money. So, but that's just a long way to say, I don't blame anybody for looking at what Substack is doing and saying, hey, we want to make sure that you guys are not changing the fundamental nature of Substack. That's why, going back to what you said about a new economic engine for culture, with that being sort of our organizing principle, because I think when we came out with that, some people on Substack were like, "I knew what for what? You're guys, you're a blogging platform, you know that, right? Like you didn't make up blogging. We didn't make up blogging, but once it had started to work very, very well for writers, journalists, and authors, we always follow the people who are using the platform. And what a lot of people were saying and what they were doing, especially podcasters, what podcasters were doing was they were recording on video the podcast that they were having, like we're doing right now, and using that as collateral to be able to go out and market and help new people find them. So I think it's been interesting to watch that unfold. And I think that now people are starting to see we are, we are doing this. We're basically in beta test of being able to go live on Substack. People can go live in the Substack app. Again, that is not because we want to be TikTok. We're never going to out TikTok, even if we wanted to. But what we can do is give people new ways to express themselves. And it's just like you said, the first time people saw you on video, they really reacted to you as a person. They felt more engaged with you personally. That is what success on Substack is all about. And I know that that is what you teach people. It's that you shouldn't pretend to be some distanced, impersonal brand. You should really show the real you. And that is what people feel connected to and what they feel is different, special, and unique.
Yeah, it's so, so true. I thought it was really, really interesting when I was testing out Substack video and it gave me the option for me to use that within podcasting, right? I was sat there mind blown. I was like, okay, so this has been a video and I've re-recorded it as a video, but then now I'm being given this option where I can pull through the audio to not only my Substack podcast, which is where it's hosted. For anybody that doesn't know, Substack hosts my podcast. That's what I do with it. It lives on Sparkle and Substack, the publication, but also pull it through to other platforms so that if people were searching around Substack education on some other platforms, that would pull through. And it was a real moment of, well, I didn't record it for that, but actually this could be really useful for people. So it was like an immediate yes. It was just that, again, it just was new. It was just a new way of thinking about things. And it's like, well, of course, that's going to streamline my whole creative process if I do that. And so from that point, it was less, okay, I put it on YouTube and then I'm going to edit it and it's going to go off. And then eventually in a few months' time, it'll be a podcast posted on Substack and pulled through to the platforms. It was more like, I could put this on Substack today. Like I just recorded it this morning. It could go on to, and it was like, okay. And because I'm in this real space with the people that I mentor where I do celebrate imperfection, I'm like, you know what? That we really do need to throw away the heavy rule book of perfectionism because it has actually just stuck like a thorn in our side in our creative process, and it is stilted and really kind of just helped us to just be so stuck in terms of where our creative flow wants to go. So part of that is because we haven't had the platforms that we've been able to use. So we talk a lot around, okay, like we had a WordPress blog and it was really difficult to make it do the things that you wanted it to do. And then for the people that have come to Substack from the old blogging days, there's a cherished kind of moment for them where they're going, this is like the old Google e-reader days and we're having such a wonderful time. And yet in our short human existence of creating online, we're being given all of these new options because of Substack. And I'm just so passionate about us just leaning in and going, you know what if we tried it? How would that feel?
Yeah.
Not bypassing our nervous system at all, but kind of just because I trust Substack and I have trusted Substack since I joined, and everything I've seen you guys do, it's been in wholehearted response to the creators. It feels like you give us more tools, you listen to what we need, and it feels like a real opportunity for us as creatives to dance with this self-limiting belief that we have to be X, Y, and Z to create with video, or we have to have done X, Y, and Z podcast school before we can make a podcast. We could actually have a conversation, feel comfortable enough to go, okay, that's video, or okay, that's audio, and put it out to our audience and invite them in, whether that's in a smaller paid subscriber circle or whether that's for our whole audience. Super interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, that again, that truly resonates so much what you're saying about perfectionism and how people can be held back. And I feel I'll tell a story. This was not too long after I came to Substack. I can remember talking to, at the time, my boss was Sophia Eftiamu, which people might see her on Notes sometimes, and she is the head of writer relations at Substack. And we were talking about having a template. Some other blogging platforms and writing platforms have the ability to have a template. And I was like, well, do you think Substack would ever let people have it? Now, we do have something like a template, which is if you write a post, let's say you have the same format for your post all the time, you can duplicate that post and, duplicate it 100 times, and that can be your template. So we do have at this point something like templating, but at the time we didn't have the feature. And I was sort of like, well, Substack really needs something like a template that people can reproduce. So if they have the same newsletter going out every Tuesday. But Sophia's perspective, she said, look, I think that the writers that I talk to, it is coming on and having that blank page. That is really precious and good and special. And it kind of woke me up to like the simplicity is a feature. The ease of use is a feature. So when people come, and going back to the perfectionism issue, there is something where people feel like, well, if I want to have a podcast, I probably need to go and I need to, take this course, or I need to read a bunch of books, and maybe I should research a bit more, and maybe I should watch some more YouTube videos. I can completely relate to that. When I'm learning something, I always want to overdo it on the upfront and like, okay, and then the first time I do it has to be just so. But it's much better to, the best example I've seen people give of this is if you go back and watch Joe Rogan's first ever podcast episode, whether you're a fan of Joe Rogan or not, the man has millions of fans, right? And the first episode, he's like talking into the mic, trying to figure out whether it's turned on or not. And it's very sort of just a goofy guy. He didn't watch any YouTube videos, he just tried it. And so I think Substack is really set up for people to do the same thing, to just jump in and try. And people, I have literally talked to people where I've reached out to them, and I say, you're doing this content on Twitter, this investing analytical perspective on Twitter, where you're doing threads where you talk about a stock. I see people really like that. On Twitter, that kind of goes below the timeline really fast. Have you ever thought of doing something like a Substack where you're going to have a portfolio of your work in a permanent archive? And they're sort of like, well, I only have 1,200 Twitter followers, and I'm waiting till I have 5,000. Well, you know what I'm going to say about that. Just do it at the same time, because we know anybody who has posted on Substack knows it itself creates an engine of people finding you. And there's a tremendous amount of personal pride when you sit back and say, oh, I said I was going to post 5 different stock ideas over 5 months in a row. And I did. And now I have a permanent record of that forever. The creation feels good. And it can be, even if it's not something conventionally creative, even if it is something that's related to a career skill or an analytical ability, it still feels the same way. So I think that I hope that, I think we hope that the structure of Substack lends itself to just, I open it up, it's a blank page. It's that moment of freezing when I don't know how to start. But then if I do start, I can just make it look however I want. And there is no template being imposed. And there is no like, I'm just going to press a button, AYI will do it for me. I will do it for myself. And that's what the platform is all about.
I love that. And so many times recently, I found myself writing a note, and because of the responses to that note, I've built a bigger long form post. So that's been a really
I
interesting
love that.
creative process, because you don't need to wait to see if this lands with anybody. You've kind of tested it a little bit on notes, and then you've gone, actually, yeah, there is something in this and it's well written. I'm going to just extend that a bit and like enhance some of the ideas. So that's been another interesting thing. So yeah, the people that are within my audience quite often will be nervous about audio, nervous about video, nervous about notes. And some of that nervousness is coming to a new platform and making sure to kind of press the right button, even though,
Oh,
it
sure.
is very, very intuitive. And some of it is that hangover from kind of just feeling confident enough to share. So this morning in the membership, someone had said, I'm about to post a video. I'm really worried I'm going to get unsubscribes. What do you think? And so we had a little bit of backward and forward mentoring. And then I asked if she would put it in our group chat. So on Substack, we have this lovely subscriber. It's like a WhatsApp chat, but it's obviously with your publication. So that was all in there. And I've only just shifted it so that my paid members can start chats. I did a little trial of it over the summer because
Oh, nice.
I'm just a bit of a control freak about that. So I always wanted to start the conversations and be there for everyone. Whereas it was just getting a little bit too much for me to do it that way. So I've shifted it, which again, I love about the platform. So she posted it and then she already got a couple of responses. And when I went over and had a look at the video, it's it's the most beautiful video of
Oh,
nature,
wow.
of the turn of the seasons. And it just blends so beautifully with our words. And I felt like in those few moments of watching it, I just got to know her. So she's been in my membership a little while. And you've got a sense of who people are from the messages that they send, and maybe if they come live on a Zoom call or whatever. But there's just something else about video in that human to human connection. And I had an emotive experience watching this beautiful
Nice.
video
Wow.
that she'd made that she was worried about people unsubscribing for. So sometimes we lock onto the negative things that might have been said or the kind of flurry of things that are coming through, and it's not the truth. It's just people want to have their voices heard, and then that happens to be what we see on notes or whatever else. So I just really want to encourage people to lean into it for your personal creative practice and to just give it a go, because I think that we are very used to consuming video content, and it doesn't have to be the super fast paced or attention grabbing type of video content that we've seen on social media. It can be something very, very different. It can be like this is a video podcast. It can be just a little bit more insight into your world and then help people connect to your writing. And I do think that that has, for me, for sure, cemented more paid subscribers. So if you're looking to grow with free and with paid subscribers, what I feel has worked for me is that I am front and center in my publication. I'm there. People can see me on a video, they can see snippets of things. I've been very like, okay, here I am. I'm in my office again. I want to talk to you all. And I just
Yes.
feel like, yes, it was hard to start with, but it didn't take very long before I felt comfortable and it felt easeful. So I just wanted to put in that little nudge as well. I don't know whether you found some of that in some of the writers that you've managed, Linda, and whether that kind of encouragement is filtering through and people are trying it, or what you think.
People are definitely trying it, and it's just as you said. It's saying I don't need things to look perfect and slick and like I'm a professional YouTuber with a team of 10 people around me. It can be more lightweight. It can be just holding up your phone and talking into the phone. I've seen many people do that successfully. I'm name dropping a lot of Substack people, but another Substack person is Austin Tedesco, who on my team, he is the person who leads video and podcasting work with writers and creators. And what he lately has been telling us that according to his research is working, and he's always talking and looking at the data, and it's really lo-fi, low fidelity, simple, talk to the camera, it's personal. What does it feel like? It feels like I'm on a FaceTime call with you, right? Or it feels like
Okay.
it feels like we are literally chatting, rather than I'm going to make it look like I have some kind of a set behind me and look like I'm the evening news. It works much better for it to feel lightweight and casual. You just did one take, and there's no script, and I think it's ideal, because that will make people feel like they do not have to uh, attain some standard of professionalism. Your standard of professionalism is that you are creating from your heart and really thinking that there is something substantive to what you are saying, as opposed to I have to look like I'm, an ABC newscaster, or have to be very perfect, or, oh my gosh, I can't make a, video today because my hair is not working perfect. Whatever it is, rather to say I am a real person and I'm not going to pretend not to be a real person is what does work really well and resonate. And I want to say something about what you mentioned about unsubscribes, because this is the mental it can be mentally predatory when you really look carefully at your list of who's subscribing and unsubscribing. One thing that you have seen me post on notes a lot, because I think people don't know this if they have not used email as a distribution tool for their work, is you will, by and large, get unsubscribes every time you do a send. You will get new subscribers in between your sends. So in between you're doing sends, people will find you, they'll come across you, a friend forwards the email and they find you, you post on social media, you post on notes. So you if you are doing the work of self-promotion and self-marketing, which I know is a really tough part of it, but if you are doing that work, you will get subscribed in between your sends. When you do a send, you're reminding everybody that they signed up for your thing. And that might be the day where they say, I just get too much email. I'm going to clean up my inbox. I'm going to unsubscribe from these. And you look at it, you say, oh my gosh, how did I offend these people, why do they suddenly not like me? And you overthink about it. It is normal in the email industry for you to get unsubscribes every time you send. So if you do, you should, for this, the publications and the Substacks that I've set up myself in the past, I don't, have my unsubscribe set up to send to me. And I frankly, you can really overthink it, because what are you trying to do? You're not trying to get as many subscribes as possible so that you can post up ads and make money from your click-throughs. What you're trying to do on Substack is develop your tribe, right? This is borrowed from Seth Godin, who always wrote books about the marketing concept of, you're trying to get your tribe. Or it's also borrowed from Kevin Kelly, who 25 years ago said what you need to make a living on the internet is 1,000 true fans who are willing to pay you something. And I mean, both of those concepts really are part of the underpinning of Substack, of who and what I'm trying to find. So when I don't mean to be glib by acting like, oh, if somebody unsubscribes, they were never really there for you in the first place. I appreciate that it is each on Substack, it's one by one. There's no, again, there's no magic button that you can press and get 10,000 people to care about your Substack. It really is one by one that people are choosing to give up their email address, but unsubscribes when you send. I'll tell you, I've seen some of these people who have lists that have hundreds of thousands of people on them. Their unsubscribes when they do a send are crazy. If they were actually worried about, whoa, hundreds of people unsubscribed, they don't worry too much about that. They worry about, am I driving the boat forward and creating a publication that is really exemplary of what I'm trying to do in the world? And am I talking about it and shouting about it enough to attract the tribe that I want to attract?
That's just super reassuring. And I know on the podcast before, people have mentioned both Seth Godin and Kevin Kelly, and I just really honestly like read their work, because it will strike a chord. And I know when you speak about things, and when Farah at Substack speaks about things in terms of the way Substack is working and the way we're consuming both through the app as readers, but also in our email inbox, I get so much more confidence around my work, because, I remind people like I am on this journey as well. So even though I've set out my stall as a Substack educator and I absolutely love the work that I do, that's building on a career of 20 years of mentoring creatives, right? So in terms of the tech platform and how things feel, in terms of having an online business, that's relatively new. I only started that in 2020.
Yes.
So for me, I feel like it's really important to remind people it is work. I talk about this book a lot, which is How to Own the Room. So
I don't know it. I must read that.
yeah,
Very cool.
so this was the healing in my public speaking. So anytime the news was coming in for a culture project, anytime I had to do a documentary with a filmmaker, I would absolutely freeze, and we'd be there for hours. And I had no idea where any of that was coming from. I could talk to people, I could run meetings, I was super confident, I could present in boardrooms, but it was the video element, once a camera was in my face. It was partly I wasn't sure where to look, but partly going back to some of those earlier experiences of understanding when we are front and center and we're very young and we're maybe not prepared or mentored properly, those things stick. So we have this kind of embodied response where we're not sure where it's coming from and we don't feel safe as humans. So we have to heal some of that stuff, which that book is really brilliant at explaining and exploring. So definitely get that. But also on the unsubscribes, and I think this is so true, the physical hurt that you might have upset another human on the internet or otherwise when you first start with the list, it's a really awful thing. And then you're like, oh no, wait, like this is part of it. So you very sophisticatedly told us about that, Linda, and I think that was a really brilliant take on it. And I think that it does just take some time. When I had my first publication, Creatively Conscious, every time I posted a guest article that I was really passionate about and that I'd spent a lot of time editing and working with the creator to put out, there would be unsubscribes. And so I made this correlation between the guest articles and the unsubscribes, but it could have just been that people were still figuring out who I was and what I was about. And the through line through the guest articles with this kind of big audacious dreams and the balance of the quiet ambition. So how do we have the quiet ambition on the day-to-day to then invest in our bigger dreams that take a longer time? And for some people, maybe they just didn't want to hear that day, so, and that's fine. And they could circle back, they could subscribe again, like you say, they might have signed up with the wrong email address. I get that so many times. People will email and be like, I've accidentally signed up with 3 emails, can you help?
Yes,
Like,
yes.
of course, yeah, let me look it out for you. So there is so much to it. And I think just being kind to ourselves in this process, but knowing and this is something that Farah said recently, knowing the people that are publishing more, are growing more on Substack, knowing the people that are using audio in the publications. I think this was in a note that you published, Linda, are growing. I think it's maybe 2.5 times faster,
Yeah,
was it?
it is faster.
Yeah, it's faster because of the intimacy that is created, the human to human connection of people feeling like they've got to know you. And of course, when we get to know people, there's something there, isn't there? It's no longer I've read some words and I feel detached, and there's some, words in a book somewhere, and maybe I'll go and leave them a kind review on Goodreads. This is a living, breathing human that's showing up in your inbox week in, week out. So
Yes.
yeah, super, super special. I did have some questions from the audience,
Cool.
and these were around categories. So this has come up, honestly, for so long in my community, where people get really frustrated about where to categorize their Substack. So
Sure.
one of the things that I'll say is, yeah, absolutely, there's some categories there, and try and pick the one that you feel fits best. Lead with the primary one where you can kind of get the best fit there, but then also there's a secondary one there that nobody really knows what it's for. And then those are attached to the leaderboard as well. So because I did a research project on the leaderboard and I'm on there, I'm spot 14 in education. Yay, sparkle. So in categories, people are saying, could we have poetry? Could we have nature? Could we have slow living? Can we find our tribe that way? How are we going to differentiate who we are, because we don't feel like we fit with culture? We don't feel like we fit with health and well-being. We just feel confused about what we should tick. And I would love an answer because, obviously we talk about it and we debate it, but what would you say to that? What would you say to the people who are looking for the right fit for that kind of category for themselves?
I can give some perspective on the categories question. When Substack first came out, you may remember this, and some people remember this. When Substack first came out, you could type in any category. You could type in anything as what your category was. And it was insane. There were like hundreds upon hundreds of different, there was no way for us to organize it. There was no way for us to really make a leaderboard. So at some point, the product team took the reins in hand and they made a set of categories. The same set that exists now, really. Maybe one or two things have been added to it, but the same. This is 3 years ago at this point. So I think that the categories are a major focus of writers, but we see the data of where people actually travel when they're on the Substack platform, whether they're on the website or on the app. We see how people travel, we see how people operate. And there are also lots of people at Substack who, while I was disparaging the social media platforms earlier, there are people at Substack who have worked at Instagram, worked at Facebook, had big jobs. And the benefit of that is they have seen how people travel and how people use a platform. And what we find is, I think that writers and creators overestimate to the extent to which somebody will come to Substack and be interested in slow living and find a category called slow living and go through a list. That is not really how people operate. And the reason you haven't seen us make a proliferation of categories, certainly there would be no limit to how many different categories we should have. And I think that there has been some thought around on the product team of like, okay, if we were to have a whole bunch of categories, or if we were to have, you can picture where there would be, investing, and then it would drop down and have investing in Eastern Europe, investing in Western Europe, whatever. But rather than doing that, I think that we are coming onto a more modern approach where what do we have now is the ability to apply sophisticated machine learning. And you're already beginning to see this. I have a good example of this, luckily, because we're talking today, because a few days ago, what we added in the Substack app is you have tabs at the top of the app. And so one of them is US politics. And when you click on that US politics, what it's doing, it's not taking writers who used a dropdown to put themselves into the category of US politics. It's actually taking the content of the note and analyzing it and figuring out that it's US politics and surfacing it in that stream. The same way there's a tab for finance. So the writers I deal with finance, if you click on the finance tab, it's not just people who have assigned themselves to finance. It's trying to use machine learning and recognize. You see where I am going with this. It's that the future is probably not going to be the writer slots him or herself into a category, and then the reader is going to discover them by going to that category, just because that's not typically the natural way that people act. They don't typically find a list and go through the list and let me look at each one and see what I like. They are sort of trained by the rest of the media ecosystem to wait for things to be surfaced to them. And it's like, oh, this is something I like. I mean, you see this a lot on Twitter/X right now, where the people are complaining. I see people complaining about the algorithm. They're like, why is it's serving me so much stuff that I don't like? That reaction is because people really have the readers on the internet have been trained of, if I say that I like 3 other finance publications, this thing should just know. Like if I read 3 other publications that are about stock picking, obviously this thing should know that that's what I like, and they can do that, right? Amazon can do that, Facebook can do that. Why shouldn't Substack do that? Well, Substack can do that now. So that's sort of an answer to say, rather than lean into having a whole bunch of categories that people can put themselves in. And I know people listening to this right now will say, well, that's all very well and good, Linda, but if you had more categories, maybe I could rank higher. Again, ranking high on categories. I swear, I think people who spend the most time looking at the categories on Substack are the writers and Substack employees. I feel like I look at them because I'm always like, oh, let's see what the leaderboard is for the business publications, what have you. But I think that for people who actually go on and read Substack, they are less involved in the category of culture. That's what is culture? That's so huge. But rather than proliferating and saying, let's divide culture into 200 things, which we actually absolutely could, because there's enough there. I think we are saying, what are ways that we can be very sophisticated and use the most cutting edge? But we've got some pretty smart engineers at Substack. I won't drop any names on the engineers, but there's some pretty smart guys. And what they are really working on is working on data, working on machine learning. And what they want is, if there's somebody listening to this and they write poetry, and somebody subscribes to 2 other poets on Substack, they want to be able to, particularly in notes, but by and large on the platform, they want to be able to surface your stuff. Now, I kind of like gave the whole behind the scenes, behind the curtain on that. That's not to say that we won't change how categories work someday, but you can hear from what I've said that the reason it might be frustrating to some of the people you're mentoring or some people using Substack. Okay, I write about something I feel like there are a lot of people writing about this specific thing. I write about stamp collecting. I know 10 other people write about stamp collecting. Why can't stamp collecting be a category? We want people who care about stamp collecting to find you. We're very focused on helping them find you. It's less likely that it's going to be by categories, again, just because of the way people behave. But we are really working on the number one thing that is keeping people on Substack is discovery. It's not because we have 6 fonts you can choose from. It's because it is the best place to get discovered. So that might be the most fulsome answer that has been given to this question. But I hope it is a reassuring answer, because it says to people, it's not that we don't care. It's the opposite regarding poets. Again, my colleague Sophia very much cares about poets on Substack, has recruited poets to Substack. We very much care about poets on Substack, and we are trying to find the ways that readers will be the most receptive to guide them to your work.
Beautiful. Yeah, I really enjoyed listening to that. And I know that for me, being on notes, I loved that feature as soon as I saw it. And because I recognize what those categories are, because I know Substack inside out. So I recognized that I could click on those things and it would show me pockets of another world, because
Sure.
whether we like it or not, we do end up in an echo chamber. And I tried so hard not to be in an echo chamber on Substack. But as a reader, I like certain things. So, once I finish my work for the day, and if I've got some time while I'm kind of getting the kids sorted for bed, I'll be reading on Substack, and I'll be reading the things that I like to read. So then if I do subscribe to someone new, the recommendations tool is then going to say, you might also like this and then this. And usually then I'm like, oh, no more Substacks. I can't read anymore. But of course you want to be supportive. So I see that in action. And actually, I had Beth Kempton on the podcast this week, and we were talking. She's started a second publication that she's going to host her podcast on this year. So it's called Calm Christmas, the podcast. And she's received over 4,000 subscribers to that second publication. It's not even launched yet. So that's through the recommendation tool. So it does work. I've seen it in action. I've used it myself. I've witnessed it myself. And I think it's just one of those things of just, again, we don't need to overthink it, just choose whichever one is singing to you that day. You can always change it again, but ultimately I know that recommendations tool works because it's human reading behavior, isn't it? That's the thing. So yeah, super, super interesting. I'm really curious to ask you as well, Linda, around pricing. So this is another popular question. And in the month of September, I'm focusing in on making money on Substack, pricing, paywalling content, conversion content, as I like to call it, because there's been this kind of subtle art of the paywall, and then we've been in a place where we have learned, some of us, that actually if you make something more clear and you say to somebody, this is my paid offer and this is what you get as part of that, and this week this is what's happening, that is an easier way for people to convert. So that's what I've been teaching within my community. And one of the things that crops up for a lot of people is this kind of block around, have I made it too expensive? Shall I take it cheaper? Especially within the type of people that I mentor, who usually are creatives, or they are not spending a ton of time on Substack. So they've got the day job, and Substack is this place of self-expression, and they're super curious about it, but they're kind of balancing that curiosity with being able to manage it. So when I first came to Substack, I think the guidance was just in those boxes in gray where it was like $7.70 a year. And I changed it to pounds and just went for it. And I was like, okay, this is what we're doing. Why not? Like, let's be open to it and see what happens. People are trying, 50% off sale launches and doing that whole thing, like doing a big push. Okay, like you get 50% off for the first year if you join within this window. There's all sorts of brilliant things being tried. But for my members, that just gives them more to think about, and they get more
Sure.
confused about what they should charge. And then they're getting into that place of, well, okay, if I do charge that amount and I'm delivering this much behind the paywall, how do I feel properly paid? Because they want to feel properly paid. Like if they are going to charge, they want that for themselves. And so that timeline of when to get there, again, is something that we talk about a lot, and making sure that they feel really secure with what they're offering. So the two main mistakes that I see: undercharging and over delivering. And that leads
Ah.
to ultimately burning out, taking the whole thing
Mm-hmm.
down. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm all about joyful, sustainable growth. So I'm saying, okay, does this feel comfortable at this price point? Does offering all of this week in, week out, do you want to do it seasonally? Do you want to have a break for Christmas? Do you want to take summer off? Like, what do you want to do? And I think that is modeled really successfully by people like Emma Gannon, who's hugely successful on the platform. So I know you'll be connected to different types of writer that charge
Mm-hmm.
different
Mm-hmm.
amounts for the education, because it's finance is a whole different world than the
Yes,
cultural
it
and
is.
creative industry. But I'm really just interested in your take on it. Like, if people are stuck in that overthinking place, what are you seeing working? What should people do? How can people feel if they're starting a newsletter business, or there's an arm of their business that they want to run on Substack? How can they feel secure enough that they're not kind of panicking about it, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's such a good question, and I could talk about this for 3 hours. But to give the high level, I am helping as a huge part of my job writers who are coming on Substack. They may have a huge audience elsewhere and be thinking, how can I shepherd them onto Substack and make money off of what I am providing to them? They may be charging money elsewhere and say that the one-off sales were not a good model for me. I want to go with the subscription model. The subscription model is what defines Substack. Pricing is the hardest question in any business. And if you are puzzling over pricing, you are not alone. You are right alongside every other entrepreneur. I can specifically remember one conversation I had with this delightful retired hedge fund manager who and he also writes, and I was saying, you should come on Substack. You should, consider this as a place. And he wanted to know from me, what is the exact price? Linda, you should be able to tell me you have all the data. What is the exact price I should charge to be able to optimize my income from this and maximize my growth? And I said, I do have data, but I really can't answer that question. If I showed you a scatter plot of how, because Substacks are not like barrels of oil. It's not like the barrel of oil has a supply and demand curve, and every single Substack is it's such an eye roll answer. Every Substack is different. So it depends. What does it depend on? What value proposition are you providing for the reader? What's their perceived value of what you are doing? How much do they feel that they want to pay you? Your specific audience, what's the affordability of what you're doing? So that's another thing with these finance publishers. If everybody who they're sending to is somebody in the professional realm, and potentially they can expense it on with some Substacks, their affordability is going to be a lot higher than somebody who is writing more personal essays, and they're writing about personal experience. And we all know this. So I just remember that this hedge fund manager was annoyed with me because he felt like I was not disclosing some information that I had that would be able to help him optimize his business. But it truly is something that people can figure out through thoughtful reflection. And I would say, here's the guidance I would give. The single most common price on Substack, this won't surprise people if they pay for some Substacks, is in US dollars, $5 a month and $50 a year. The lowest price you can charge on Substack is $5 a month and $30 a year. So I would say, if you are doing something, and sometimes you will come across Substacks and you will be so, oh my gosh, this guy's charging 14 US dollars a year, or some of the people I work with who are doing finance content, professional content people can use at work. It may be much more than that. And you may feel like, well, is this what people are charging? That person, keep in mind, might be doing it as a full-time job, and they might be doing 3 long posts a week. So I would say and the other thing I would say is the pledges. Many people will be familiar with pledges on Substack. So if you have a Substack and you do not have paid turned on, you can have pledges turned on, and it actually turns on automatically when you set up your Substack. And this is only for people who don't, there's no pledges if you have paid turned on. But if you don't have paid turned on, pledges allows people to, after they go through the subscribe flow, when they're finished signing up, they see a screen that says, would you like to pledge that if this person ever does turn on paid subscriptions, that you will pay? And there's a place for their credit card, and then they can pledge. The default amount of money for pledges is $8 a month and $80 a year. There's nothing magic about that number. Again, some people are like, well, is that the right number? Because, I see you guys defaulted. Again, you can see what Substack is doing. By having pledges, we're trying to nudge people and say, hey, if one person out there thinks your writing is worth paying for, maybe 100 do. So we're trying to get people over that hump of nobody will think I'm worth paying for. And the second thing we're trying to do is saying, consider charging more, right? Because everybody just sees that $8. It could be the guy doing oil and gas charts, or it could be the person doing 1 post a month. That is a poem that, the propensity for somebody to pay $8 for 1 post may be less. So you need to think about what you are doing in the context of how exactly what you were talking about, Claire. It's joy and sustainability. Again, I've worked with writers who their commitment to their audience is such that they say, I'm going to do, even though I come home from work and I'm exhausted, I'm going to do multiple posts a week. And I do see that sometimes those people have less fun and have less joy after 6 months versus people who say, I'm just going to make a commitment to I know I have time to do this on the weekend. So I'm just going to make a commitment that they're going to come into work. I'll time my thing to go out at 6 a.m. Monday. They'll come into work on Monday. I specifically know somebody who does this. They want people to have their coffee, they sit down at their desk, and before they get their week started, they read this person's Substack. And this person does very well on Substack with once a week model. So think of a model that's sustainable. And then maybe if I were to provide one anchor, it would be, think of that $5 a month, $50 a year. I live in Canada, so whenever I see a subscribe screen, it's always in Canadian dollars. If you live in the UK, you're always going to, that again, that's automatic on Substack, that people will see the subscribe price in their local currency. That improves conversion. But think about something like that, because here's the last piece of this. You can always raise your price. And the way that it works by default, Claire students will know this, the way it works by default on Substack is if and when you raise your price, that price increase only applies to the people who sign up thereafter. So all of your day ones, all of your people who have been riding along with you since the beginning, who have a lower price, they keep that lower price. And if they were to ever churn, if they were to ever cancel on you, they would have to re-come in at your new higher price. So there's a lot of good things about this being the structure. So the last thing I'll say about turning on paid is, so if you anchor on those prices, if you think about it's my value proposition and what value I offer to the reader and who my audience is, that might dictate that I can charge more. And don't underprice yourself, right? I'll tell one more little anecdote about pricing. So there is a publisher called Doomberg on Substack that if we talked about how people can be in a bubble. Many people listening to this won't know Doomberg, but anybody in finance will, because they are the highest revenue, top of the leaderboard finance publisher. And a cool thing about them is they've done lots of podcasts where they talk about their experience on Substack and they talk about how they were successful. And something they've shared is, when they did go paid, they set it at $30 US a month and $300 a year. And I think that took, it took, clearly they were very analytical about it. They have a very quantitative approach to how they do Substack. And they could have just been like, well, we'll just charge $10 and $100 and that's good. No, they had a philosophy around it. And it was the demographic of our audience. There's a huge group that will never pay. We're not too worried about them. They can read our free stuff. But then the group that will pay, we believe they will be willing to pay more. And it turned out that hypothesis was right. So I don't want people to come away from this thinking, okay, well, it sounds like she says everybody should charge $5. It's not that. It's that you should think very carefully about the value proposition. Value proposition is more than just frequency, because you may be publishing once a week, but it is so valuable that people are willing to pay $30. But you should not be afraid if you're starting and you're experimenting and you're putting a toe in to start at that kind of 5 and 50 that a lot of people use. That is, I mean, what do we say, the proverbial cup of coffee? Depends what kind of cup of coffee, right? If you're getting bubble tea, now it's more. So it's something that it's affordable, but it's meaningful. I don't type in my credit card number every time I'm on a subscribe screen. So those would be the guidance. It's fuzzy. It's fuzzy because it has to be, because there is nobody who can just spit out a spreadsheet for you and tell you how much you should charge. But I will say, and you'll relate to this, the moment that you have the first person who pays for your Substack that is not your friend, not your spouse, not your mother, it's some person on the internet, it is a very magical moment. And it's a moment that we'd like more people to have.
Yeah, it's really, really magical. And I think, yeah, just managing expectation with yourself as well. I share a lot, and these stats might have changed now, Linda, but I share between 3 and 5%. Substack had said that is around about the average conversion in terms of free to paid, or readers to paid subscribers. And just to give people that indication that it still can be an active service as a newsletter, or you could take the whole thing paywalled if that's what you really want to do.
Yes.
There's been some really bold moves by journalists recently who've gone, you know what? I've done loads of this. I've done my whole career of this. Now everything is paid, and it's going well for them, So it really depends on the individual. I know my co-author of the Substack book, Russell. So Russell and I wrote this book, How to Build a World-Class Substack. We had lots of fun doing this. It's just wrapped up on Kickstarter. So the book is done now.
Can't wait to buy it. I'm going to buy it. I need that on my bookshelf.
You've got it in the office. We sent 3 copies to San Fran. So
okay.
Yeah, there's 3 copies in San Fran. So go to San Fran.
That's getting stolen.
That's getting
stolen right off the shelf by me.
Have a look. So obviously this is my and Russell's unique take on how we've come to Substack, and we've got interesting and adjacent experiences. And Russell right now has done a birthday sale where he's applied a whole bunch of coupons, and he's brought another, I don't know, it was like 150 people in paying with
Very
this
cool.
birthday sale coupon, so he's a data guy. So he's always around, what if I try this? He's built his list since I've known him. He's built his list from about 14,000 to about 70,000 subscribers. And it's all around his author work, like his nonfiction work, but also he's a fiction writer as well. So he's a super interesting guy. I think he's got like a twin somewhere because he does so much work. Anyway, it's been really interesting to talk to him about that, to understand how that feels. He doesn't offer the video style of things, although he'll pop up and do the odd thing. So mainly it's the writing, and then he's got an archive of books behind the paywall so people can access the books.
Oh, fantastic.
And
yes.
he would say this, he doesn't mind if people are paying something and people value it, they can choose. So he did this sliding scale experiment where there was up to 90% off the annual subscription. And I don't necessarily think this would fit anybody that I work with. I think it would just be too confusing and too bold and too scary for them. But for Russell, it was like, if I do this, I'm just super interested in who wants 10% off and who's going to go for the 90% off. And I'm just going to put it all out there. And his goal is to get to 1,001 paid. So he's like less than a couple of hundred off now. So
wow, so exciting.
It's so exciting for me. Once I realized the work that I wanted to do on Substack, there was no way I was reaching for that goal of 1,001 page, because there's too many people with too much touch time. So it's like, I don't need to do that. So what am I doing instead? So being able to go into year 2 of Sparkle and know that the Diamond membership, so my founding membership is called Diamond membership, was something that I really wanted to hold people in for an entire year, has felt really, really nourishing. So I've just closed that off until January. And what was really interesting and why I wanted to make this point was, I didn't know when I started my publication how long people were going to stick around for. So now I've been on Substack 2.5 years. Some of those people on Creatively Conscious, my first publication, are still paying. And the ones that were paying for Sparkle at the beginning then became Diamond members. So the timeline can be so different. People might want to be a founding member from the start and be like, give you that pledge and give you that extra boost. Other people might be leaning into your content for 6 months, leaning into your articles, understanding who you are in the world and the value that you offer behind the paywall. That could take a year, could take longer.
Yes.
So, and this is the joy of it all, because it is quite random. Just yesterday I got 4 new paid subscribers and there was no boost attached. It was just what happened yesterday.
Very cool.
Yeah,
that's great.
and that's not every day, but that was cool yesterday. And so again, that nervous system piece of us kind of feeling comfortable with what we're offering, how we're onboarding people, making sure our welcome email's really clear, making sure people understand what it is that you're offering and what they're going to get by subscribing. So again, building that trust with people that they understand what's coming when can be really, really helpful and reassuring. And then as people get to know you and get to trust you, then they might consider pressing that button to upgrade to paid. And I've seen that happen a lot for my clients. It's been really beautiful to see.
Yeah, I wanted to call back to one thing you said earlier in your earlier in the conversation, and then also that you just repeated, which is that you have to let them know over and over again. And that doesn't mean being salesy. That doesn't mean begging, but it's there's an old thing in Hollywood of people need to see a message 7 times before they react to it. And I think that a useful thing that that people who are on Substack and trying to build an audience to keep in their minds is, however obvious you think it is to you, it is not obvious to everybody else on the internet who has 17 tabs open and literally is watching TikTok at the same time and the football game's on. And you need to tell them so incredibly clearly what is going on. And you need to tell them over and over, and it will feel weird to you. But I'm going to give a couple of examples. One is there's a writer, very well-known writer on Substack, Anne Helen Peterson. And I always, when people are coming on Substack, I always say, go sign up for free for Anne Helen Peterson. And, hopefully pay if you like her work too. Because what you're going to see is she's a very thoughtful user of headers and footers. And the headers and footers, as people listening to this will mostly know, you can customize the headers and footers. They do not appear on your Substack publication, but they do appear in the email, which is where the vast majority of reading of your publication is going to occur. And you can make it so you're sending an email to everybody, but the header that paying people will see will just be nothing, or will just be like, thanks for being here. But if somebody is not paying yet, it'll say, hey, this is and we have some default headers and footers that will go out just by virtue of being on Substack that will say, this is a paid version of the publication, this is a free version, what have you. But what she does, I think, very well is to say, right now you're not part of the community. If you do choose to pay, you'll be supporting this important work I do. And it's making the obvious making what her intention is more obvious. And, in marketing terms, it's a call to action. But in personal terms, it's just a message to the person to whom she's sending an email saying, you know what, it would be really terrific if you got everything that I send out. It would be really terrific if you were able to read everything that I do. So it's reminding them that you do have a piece that's behind the paywall. Of course, the other thing is, probably the best conversion tool in all Substack is that paywall you can plunk in the middle of a post. And another thing I would encourage people is, in the early days of Substack, we didn't have that. And every post you send out would be either to everybody or to your paid people. There was no way to put a paywall in the middle. The ability to put the paywall in the middle can reduce the amount of work you have to do, because what you're doing is you have a whole section that's for everybody. And Doomberg is really good at this. They'll have their first section that will start to get into the theme they're talking about. And then they will say, and here's the data and here's what we really think. They will give a verbal indication they're about to go deeper. It's not clickbait. It's saying, this is the extra stuff that, guess what, you have to pay for it. So as people, if anybody is listening to this and they're thinking about their going paid strategy, first of all, that the paywall exists and you can put it wherever you want. And second of all, that it is a wordless way to let people know that the deeper part is behind here. And I've seen people do things like they have a post where they are telling a personal story, and then it's behind the paywall that they're talking about their divorce, they're talking about a miscarriage, and then they put behind the paywall the part that is really intimate and personal. It's not because it's clickbait. It's because that's just not for everybody. That part of what they're saying, they only want to share it intimately with people who are part of their inner circle and bought in. And I think that using the paywall that way and using the headers and footers that way, it is very helpful in terms of this issue around what we're saying, where you have to tell people repeatedly before they figure it out. I always say, here's my little bugaboo. People will have a name for their Substack, and it'll be like, my Substack, I want to call it like Linda's Substack Zone. So I'll just call it LSZ, like some name nobody can figure out. And they'll come on my Substack, it'll say at the top LSZ. It gives absolutely no, I know you have probably talked to the people you mentor about naming. It gives absolutely no information about what is going on. Like, it's better to have it be obvious. It's better to take them by the hand and say, like, I have a Substack called Substack FAQ, which actually is kind of a bad name because it sounds like it is the official Substack FAQ, which it is not. Support.substack.com is the official Substack FAQ. So I probably have to change the name of my Substack, but Sparkle on Substack. How long does it take me to figure out what that's about? 3 seconds. So think about the name of your Substack too as being something that is drawing in the reader, making it very obvious, and is part of that made up number, but 7 times that you have to tell them before they figure out what it is, what's going on, and what they're going to get for paying.
Yeah, super, super helpful. And actually, I was listening to a podcast just this morning that was saying it's nearer 22 now because of our distractions. So like
That's
22,
hilarious.
I know,
22 times. I'm going to use
22
that in
touch
future.
points. Yeah. So,
Yes.
I mean, obviously, we can check the data on that, but what we're basically saying is talk about it more. And the headers and footers is a brilliant example. I've got a workshop on that exact thing because once it's set up, you don't have to then have that conversation with yourself about it again. You know, it's already
Yes.
in there. You've already said it. It'll go out. It'll do its thing. I also really like the buttons that you guys have. So like get the app, like I've got that in one of my
Mhm.
headers because I'm trying to encourage community, and community can happen more easily on the app just because people are kind of hanging out there and chatting on notes and coming into chat and all that good stuff. So yeah, it just depends on the motivation, but just being clear about what it is. And also, you know, I've been in service to people who are just still nervous about the internet. So sometimes people are like, oh, do I have to pay? Like, what happens? Like, I don't understand. And because on the subscription page, the signing up for free is right at the very end. So our brain is reading left to right, which is, you
Yes.
know, it's great
Oh,
of Substack
that's,
to
believe
do
me,
that.
that's
Sneaky.
intentional. That's
Yeah, it's
very, very
good.
intentional.
It's
Yeah.
good. But then people are going, wait, what? Like, I've got to pay now, and they're not reading it all the way along. So we do have a job to do in terms of supporting our readers, in terms of supporting people from other platforms, all of that
Hmm.
stuff. And in the simplest terms, like we've talked about, you're sending them an email, right? It's going to go right into their email inbox. And then, you know, it's Wonderland time. Come on in, guys. This is where the party is.
Yes.
This is where we all hang out. We develop friendships, kinships, colleagueships, all of that good stuff. So hopefully that's all been food for thought for you guys today. It's been so brilliant to hear Linda's take on it. And just because you're just at the helm with a completely different profile of writer, I've really enjoyed
Hmm.
listening to you talk about that and share some more of that. And I do think the biggest takeaway that I can share with people, given what I've heard today, is just get out of your echo chamber a little bit. You know, nudge yourself out of your echo chamber. If you're kind of making decisions around what you might want to price or how you might want to set things up, read some other bits, like have a lovely weekend and just pop into some other categories and read some other work as
Completely.
well, because there's so much good stuff there. And there are so many ways with language, like we all end up, you know, in the creative circles using similar language, and actually when you kind of pop in and read some other things, I get some great ideas from that. So yeah, go do that. But thank you so much, Linda. Thanks for spending the time with us today. Thanks for being here. Thanks for all you do on notes. It's really, really beautiful to be connected, and hopefully speak to you again soon.
Thank you so much, Claire. This was a lot of fun. And yes, see you on Notes 100% for sure.
See you there.